Hey everyone, welcome to the Aeon 14 podcast. This is episode 30. I'm Jen McDonald, and today I'm joined by Lisa Richmond, Amy Duboff, Maybe James Aaron, and our illustrious leader, Mal Cooper. We talk about things, all things Aeon 14 and all things related, from the science behind the series to science fiction and all other things we think are cool and you tell us you want to hear about. Today we're talking about changing gears, switching between projects and stretching our legs and trying new things. But before we get into all that, let's get some updates. Mal?
Yeah, so I guess the first update that I should probably give for myself is that I've changed my name to Mal, and I've announced that I'm gender fluid, which means I kind of exist somewhere. I'm what people call non-binary. And I kind of end on the female end of the spectrum, a little bit more on the male end of the spectrum, at least in how I present myself. I can't talk like a girl at all, so you're still going to hear my dulcet tones the same way you always have. But I won't get into too much, but I actually wrote a post that I put in the Aeon 14 fan group. So if you go there on facebook.com/groups/Aeon 14 fans, you can read a little bit about it. I actually talked a bit about the science because that was a really interesting part of it for me, the fact that there are actual demonstrable scientific differences between people who are strictly on the binary side and people who are not, or people that move. I think one of the most interesting things I learned in this whole thing is I learned what cisgender actually means. That's my first tangent of the day. I always thought it was weird that we had invented a new name to describe the norm, but cis is Latin for meaning on the same side. So your gender and your sex are on the same side. So you're cisgendered, and if you're transgendered, your gender is on the other side of your sex, is what you feel like. So that's why they use the word cisgender. It's not like someone invented a new word to try to be insulting to regular people or anything like that. So that was a neat thing I learned. And I'm also interested in linguistics, being a writer, so that was kind of neat. So that's I'm going by Mal now. I specifically chose something with an M, because that way I can still be MD Cooper, because that's really a big part of who I am, obviously. And it's actually also short for Mallory, which is the name of a character from the Warlord books, and also who was also shown up in the main Orion War series. I thought it was just kind of funny too, because she's kind of a bad guy.
She's like a bad guy that turns.
Yeah, she becomes good, and she
goodish. Yeah,
a hard road to hoe, to get where she was. Amy, of course, pointed out that Mal means bad, and Mallory actually means unlucky. But I feel like I'm claiming it, I'm taking it back, or it's ironic or something like that. So I'm going with it.
It's definitely grown on me now.
That's good. And I think it's like all the other M names that I knew that I liked were either half of the M names that are out there are basically plays on Michael of some sort. And I want to sort of announce that this was a bit of a change. That's why one of the reasons I wanted to go through names. So it's we're talking about Mal, we're talking about the way I am now. And all the other ones were either plays on Michael, or they were names of close relatives and good friends. So, I can't use any of those. So no one I know is named Mallory. So there we go. So that's my big update.
Yay.
I think that's probably a more significant update than the rest of us are going to be able to put out there.
Who wants to follow?
Amy.
Sure. Okay. So I have had kind of a weird April and into mid-May for travel stuff. So we had the JordanCon conference where Mal and I got to hang out, and it was super awesome. And then I was home for a couple of weeks, and then I went to the Nebulous conference in LA, which is, as you can imagine, from England, a pretty long haul flight. So I lost a good week and a half there between packing and recovering from jet lag and being at the conference itself. So the last few days, though, I've gotten back into writing. I am finally making actual real progress on the Serenity series. So that is the only thing that I have going on for the next month and a half, the rest of the series while Mal looks that over.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
I hope to be making next.
It says my internet connection is unstable. Let me just check something here.
Hey, 3 weeks though, Amy. That's exciting.
Hopefully. That's the plan anyway. I figured I need to finally start giving myself hard deadlines. That's been my problem. I've just kind of been like, oh, work on it. And I haven't been very good about actually making myself do that.
So. That's something Mel and I discovered too, or that we talked about, was that if we don't give ourselves like deadlines and like hard to-do lists, like we don't do anything.
Yeah, so I've been really, really bad, and Mel has been such a good friend in letting me get away with having mental health time while all of the drama stuff was going on, but I need to get back to it at this point.
Yeah. I don't know if it's from always being in jobs that are deadline driven, or if it's just the way I am. Like, I don't know that I was always super deadline driven when I was younger, but then of course I was a kid and I didn't, get anything done anyway. But I worked for years in software development, and everything is deadlines. And I'm sure you guys have all worked in careers too, where it's all about
deadlines. Yeah. I mean, all of the so I was a proposal manager, and so everything that I did was on a 3 to 5 week timeline, and they were very hard deadlines. And I was working on projects that would get submitted within minutes of the actual due date, getting uploaded to a procurement website. So I think you do get a little bit addicted to the adrenaline rush of the last minute thing, and yeah. So I need more deadlines for myself. This has been a good learning experience that is something I need.
Yeah.
Maybe that's our issue, Mal. Maybe we're adrenaline junkies, and that's why we're doing the down to the wire stuff with the
No matter how we try to like stop doing it, we still do it anyway.
We're like, okay, this is the last time. Okay, no, wait, this is the last time. Okay, no, really, this is the last time.
We've kind of given up on saying that now, haven't we? We're just like, it's another one. We're going down the wire again.
It is. Yeah. Really.
Lisa.
Well, let's see, I'm working on two things. Actually, things have kind of been kind of crazy for me too. We just got back from Rochester, and I was flight planning something while we were driving home, and my phone, the app on my phone kept telling us that there was an obstacle ahead. And it was in the same voice, it was in the same Google voice as Google Maps, and Google Maps has now this new feature where they will tell you like if there's speed cameras or speed traps ahead. And we had just, maybe 10 minutes earlier heard the voice say that there was a speed camera. And so I'm looking at the road thinking, okay, there's an obstacle ahead somewhere, and not finding it and freaking out thinking, we're about to hit that. And the voice gets more and more urgent. And then it starts telling me to pull up. And the steering wheel's just not cooperating.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
So yeah, we were up there for several days, so that kind of threw my deadline. And I'm a very deadline-driven person. Always have been with both my film industry work and also the work when you're working on radiation physics stuff that has QA deadlines, you kind of have to stick with when it radiation is deteriorating, so it's kind of important to
on the clock.
Yeah. So I'm working on the Soul Dissolution number 1, the Nugent Uprising, and I just finished a chapter yesterday where it's dealing with Williams, he was on the Intrepid.
Yeah, he was when Tanis was chief of security. She brought in 2 platoons to aid with security, and he was one of them.
Yeah,
he was a sergeant on one of them.
So he's the male protagonist, and I'm working with the female protagonist, which is Joe's sister, Caitlin. And actually, are they twins?
I don't think they're twins. They're
not twins. Rory is, I think, the older
of
the 2. So Rory and Caitlin, and they have just arrived at Cruigna. And so I kind of got into describing Night Park and the fountain, and so the fountain now has a description around it. Cool. And how they actually, get to see the ravens and the parrots and everything. So that's so fun. And I'm also working on my first non-Aeon 14 novel at the same time. So it's the first time I've worked on 2 novels at once, and I bop back and forth. So if I get like a brain freeze on one of them, I'll just flip over to the other and start working on it. And I created a really, really, really awesome bad guy yesterday. I'm really excited about. So
it's Lisa's favorite thing to do.
Oh yeah, he's bad.
Some people probably remember, but this is not just a spoiler. It's sort of a neat little Easter egg. So, if anyone's read the Destiny Rising books, where they start out, it's like the extended version of Out System. It starts with Joe and the siege of Maki Maki, which in my mind I still say Make. I have to remember it's actually Maki Maki. And so anyway, there's 4 people that are in the Scattered Disk Admiralty, and one of them is Admiral Erden. And Admiral Erden was Colonel Erden, or Erdon, in the Tannis prequels, the Origins of Destiny books. And and actually there's some neat tie-ins like in that bit in Destiny Rising. There's a ship that comes in, and they're just basically they just haul it in and use it as an antimatter bomb. That ship should have actually had engines, but Tannis actually stopped them from getting the components that they needed to put engines on that ship 10 years or 20 years earlier in the Origins of Destiny books. So like a bunch of cool tie-ins. But Erdon is basically one of the people that's really trying to start up the next solar war. And you can see that by a number of his actions in the books that are already out. So Lisa is going to be writing for him because Lisa just loves to write bad guys. So that's what got me thinking about that. It's like Lisa just loves villains. So
there is a surprise, and we're not going to spoil it. There is a surprise bad guy that Erden ends up connecting with somewhere. We're not going to tell you where, but it'll be a cool surprise. It actually kind of fits back in with some other Tannis history. So, yeah.
You're making me nervous.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, the tie-ins are a blast.
I agree.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things of all times to write is tie-ins.
And basically, we all live for making Jen squirm. We're like, how can we write something?
I feel like that sometimes when I'm reading. I was like, I swear this is meant to poke at me.
We're the first reader, so yeah. Sometimes we are like, okay, if we get a reaction from Jen, then we did it.
Yeah, I just get giggly when I write bad guys. It's just so much fun.
That's just kind of creepy, Lisa, to think of you giggling while you're writing Prime, because Prime was a bad guy.
Oh, he was awful.
Yeah. This guy's pretty bad.
Look, he's giggling again. This is not a good sign.
Okay, moving on.
By the way, for people who didn't quite notice, when Lisa was talking before, she was using an app that you're normally supposed to use in an airplane.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was super clear to everybody, but yeah. Because you said at one point it was telling you to pull up too, right?
Yeah. It's a flight planning app.
Yeah,
and we're planning on flying to Texas here in a couple of weekends, and so I was trying to map it. And obstacle, and it said caution obstacle ahead, and it said that several times, and then it started yelling it, and then it started yelling obstacle pull up. So yeah, it was an aviation app. Yeah.
Is it yelling about the cars in front of you?
Yeah.
People were gonna like crash with them.
Also thought that she was way too close to the ground. I think it's kind of what it is.
Yeah, it has an altimeter built in, and it uses the GPS on the phone. So yeah, that's what was going on.
Oh my goodness.
That's a riot.
Okay, Jen, what about your?
I've picked up a couple new clients, which is very exciting for my business. But it's going to be weird to be editing outside of Aeon 14 for a while. But I'm also in a play. I have dress rehearsal today, actually. It's a 10-minute play fest, so each play is 10 minutes or less. And I'm in one of them around, the theme is fire, so they're all based around fire. And I play a low-level demon, speaking of evil characters. I play a low-level demon who's tired of torture in hell, and so to leave that, I apply for a new job in corporate America, which doesn't go the way that I hope. And so that's really fun. So we have dress rehearsal today, and then that is happening next week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's actually been kind of a stressful journey. We had originally a director and 3 female characters. And then the day before our first rehearsal, the director dropped out, and I got a call from the producer of the whole company telling me that our director pulled out, and that we had another one come in, which is good. We had a veteran director work in, not one I've worked with before, but I know him. He's great. And then, so we still had rehearsal the next day. And then we found out with the other actors that we would only be able to rehearse once a week up until opening. And there's only 4 weeks between casting and performance. And so the director and I were like, that's not going to work. And so it was really stressful because we're like, how are we going to do this? Like, it was looking like we were going to have to scrap the whole thing. And so, and the other ladies were like, oh, that's too bad. And they like left. And then the director looks at me and he's like, okay, option number 3 is we get rid of them and you and I do this thing. We find other people and we put it on. And I'm like, let's do that. So
Wow.
It's been a huge journey, and we were like 2 weeks behind in rehearsals behind everybody else. But I think we're in a really good place considering dress rehearsals today, and I think it's going to go well, and we've recovered. And yes, so but for a little while I was feeling like I was in the Scottish play. It was so, everything was falling apart. But
you have to take pictures when you're fully. You have to take pictures when you're fully done up for the dress rehearsal today, because
yeah.
You said one where you had, because you're wearing contacts too, right?
I do wear contacts normally in my day today, and I'm all red and I have horns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty epic. And are you going to drive through the city again? Like, do you get like looks when you're driving through the city like that?
I do. I've scared a couple people. Like I had one guy like look at me and like jump back, and yeah. So some of them are amused, some are terrified, some think I'm just another wacko in Portland.
Yeah, because it's Portland, so they might just be like,
Portland.
oh,
Right. Yeah. They should be
fun
used
day.
to seeing stuff like that by now, but I guess not. But yeah, so I'm probably gonna do my makeup there, just so I don't have the horns on too long, because if I have them on too long, they start to come off.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, and we don't know where we are in the lineup yet.
Gotcha.
But, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's my life right now.
So I guess without James here, without him quarterbacking, this is the part where I talk about what's coming next, right?
Yep. What pre-orders are up?
Yeah. So we got shockingly, there's only 2 pre-orders up right now. There's Eve of Destruction, which is the one that James and I are working. It's the kickoff of the Solar Wars. It's the kickoff of the actual Sentience Wars, and the first of the Sentience Wars is called Solar War 1, which I just thought was an awesome title, just like Solar War 1. So James has written all of his part. I'm going through it, and I'm actually writing one of the characters in it, so I'm writing my part and making some adjustments and whatnot. And hopefully we'll have that in Jen's hands tomorrow for her to start following along afterward. And of course that follows Kara, Tim, and Lissa are they going to be the main characters in there. And we're also going to still have Nagoba and Fugia Wong, and all those folks will be making appearances in there as well. Plus, our friends like Alexander and the rest of the Scion crowd will all be in there wreaking havoc as well. And then shortly after that, so that comes out on June 13th, and then after that on July 4th, we're going to have the second of the Genevieve Queen books, Rika Coronated. And as you can guess by the title, Rika gets coronated.
No way.
Yeah, I know.
Spoilers.
That's what you're going to get out of that book. And I guess Amy or I have to actually set some publication dates for her books, the Serenity series, because that'll be good. And then we can march toward that. And of course, Amy's books are going to be about Terry, who had left the Serenity Ordis with Jessica and the Sabrina crew, and has now decided she wants to go back. She decided she didn't want to go gallivanting across the galaxy and leave everybody she knew. So she's trying to figure out what the heck she wants to do with her life. And as you can guess by the name, she probably goes back to Serenity. And Lisa said she's working on the Soul Dissolution books. We had a really good time talking about those and planning out where they're going to go. So
and they're scheduled for 2019 also. So I mean, it's not just because there are only 2 pre-orders up doesn't mean that that's all you're going to get.
Yeah. All this stuff is going to be 2019.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll get the whole Soul Dissolution done in 2019, but we're definitely going to get a start on it.
Yeah.
And then this summer, I'm gonna get some more. I want to try and finish The Huntress. I'm gonna try and write it like a book. I've been writing it chapter by chapter. I might just write it straight through, which is the Angela story. And then I'm also
I know someone named Penny who's going to be excited about that.
Oh yeah, Penny is. She's pretty stoked about that. If you guys know, she's F and Cheese Tree on the Facebook group. Because this one funny story she has, she sent it to me too, and it's like someone wrote this story while they're on LSD, clearly to Penny, but it ends with a cheese tree, a tree that actually grows cheese, just so you know, deep in the Amazon. So that's why she uses it as her name, because she thinks it's hilarious. So I'm also going to write Decisive Action this summer, which is Perilous Alliance 3.5. It's probably not going to be too long. It's going to be like a novella-length story, and it's basically be Grayson versus Maverick, because I love Maverick. He's like a fun villain. He's like the quintessential, a hot shot. I don't care that I'm so bad I'm good kind of bad guy, And he's like larger than life and over the top, and he wears like purple suits and crazy shit like that. So he's gonna be fun. He's basically, my wife Jill wrote when she was probably was this like 15 years ago at this point. She wrote an urban fantasy series called Dream Slayer. It's currently unpublished, but she's gonna rework it and publish it again. And like the villain was like this posh demon. Who wore like purple suits and whatnot. And we realized at one point that when she made Maverick, she basically just took her posh demon from her urban fantasy and rewrote him in Aeon 14.
Whatever works.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm also going to, so these things aren't going to be on pre-order right away, but they're just sort of like my summer projects to do without a lot of stress. So I can actually enjoy hanging out this summer. But I'm doing a lot of travel this summer too, so that's part of it. But I'm going to take all the Delta Team stories, and I'm going to dress them up a bit more and lengthen them a bit and whatnot, and then we'll re-release those. So I've got Andrew thinking on covers. We're going to do animated covers for those because they've got so many crazy characters on them and stuff like that trying to find like model shoots of like someone in a Cinderella dress and then someone in Catwoman, or something like that. It's just not going to work that well. But
I think it goes with the style too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean it's a fun, weird series.
Yeah.
And then the other big thing, of course, is that if you have read Starfire, you'll notice that for the first time since the first book, since Destiny Lost, there's no pre-order link in the back for the next book. And that's because, partially one, because I lost my pre-order privileges, but I'm going to get them back because Amazon always gives them back to me. But the other part is that I want to take the time to finish out these last 2 books in the Orion War without being in a huge rush. I'm going to set deadlines for myself. And I have them in my spreadsheet for where my deadlines constantly move. But I've got them at least written down. I'm working toward a goal, but I'm going to write them together. And my estimations, they're probably going to be longer than most of the other books in the Orion War. They're probably going to be as long as New Canaan was, which is the longest of the books. Because there's a lot of threads to wrap up, and I want to take a lot of little things that have been addressed and bring them all together. And then that will wrap up the Orion War. And then there's a trilogy, which I was going to call Battle for the Milky Way or something like that, but everybody agreed that was really silly sounding because the Milky Way is like the most unfortunately named galaxy in the universe. It's like our own galaxy has the lamest name of all galaxies. And not helped by the fact that there's a candy bar named after it as well, So you're like keeping it out over
but delicious.
Delicious. Yes, Milky Way Midnight.
It's got to be dark chocolate.
The midnight one. Anyway, sorry.
Segue over candy bar. So someone actually in the group, in the fan group, actually came up with a really good name for it. So I'm gonna have to hunt that down and find that. So I think that's what the trilogy. So that trilogy is gonna be massive. That's gonna be each one of those books. They're gonna be like George R.R. Martin length books, and there'll be 3 of them. So that's gonna be like
but not on his publication schedule.
Right. Yes, all 3 of those will come out next year. So that's actually going to be like the big thing that sort of will wrap up the age of the Orion War timeline. I actually still want to go back and write some other stories. Like, for example, there's a lot of stuff that Corsia has been doing that I just skipped over because everybody kept getting Corsia and Svetlana confused because they were kind of like on similar missions. They took some small fleets and they jumped out into enemy territory. So I sort of left all the Corsia stuff behind. I'm going to rewrite that later. And then of course the other thing is that if you haven't read Starfire yet, you don't know this, but I'm giving away a free book to everybody that's read Starfire. And it's not like an old book, it's a brand new book that's going to be completely free. Because as I was writing Starfire, I realized that the Jessica and Sarah plot lines were their own book. They were as large as an entire book all by themselves, and there was no way I could make my deadline and write their books properly. So I'm going to break them out into a separate novel because I kind of feel like I owe everybody that story because I set up all the stuff for them to do, and then that just disappeared and didn't get addressed. So I feel like I owe everybody the story for that. So I'm going to give that away to everybody for free.
And you've got non-Aeon 14 related. Do you want to talk about?
Oh yeah, that was the whole thing I was supposed to talk about.
That stuff. No, I mean, the three westerns,
yes,
and the game and all that stuff. So go.
Yeah. Okay.
Go.
Thank you, Amy. Wow.
Please, because the game is a kick. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
We're interchangeable. We're interchangeable.
Okay. Because the game is a Kickstarter, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say I called you Amy, Lisa, because when James joined, you moved into Amy's spot. So my brain's still associated.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's your story. You're sticking with it. Amy and I are interchangeable and all that.
There you go. Yeah, so the game is called Destiny's Sword, and I've talked about it a little bit before, but they reached out to me after they read the lead on the game project had read Rika Outcast, because one of the things they're writing is they're trying to do a video game where it's not all just like slaughter and then everybody's happy at the end and drinking beers. The idea is that like these are real people, and running around killing people actually takes a toll on you and is hard.
That's a really cool
and they're actually getting a lot of support from a bunch of veterans groups, and the government is giving them funding as well because their help in making it so that PTSD is sort of like better understood and recognized and whatnot. And the game, the big challenge in this game is one of the things I'm working on a lot too is and I think this is one of the reasons why they reached out to me is one of the things I like doing in Aeon 14 is I'll tackle heavy things. Like Rika went through a lot of crazy stuff. Rika's book starts out rather depressing, but I also do my best to make it amusing along the way, because that's what people are too. Even though we're having hard times, we try to make each other laugh. We tell jokes, and stuff like that, or we have gallows humor. So we're trying to balance all these heavy issues that are real when you're dealing with people in combat, and consulting with a lot of vets too on all that stuff, and then also try and add in some lighthearted things, because at the end of the day, games are supposed to be entertaining. So we want to make sure that the game is still fun to play and enjoyable, and that you can actually get a lot of satisfaction out of helping your team, because you're the commander of the team, and you want to make it so that these people are doing well and that they're not being completely ruined. And you're actually giving people, sometimes you have to decide, like if I do this mission and I take this person on me with this mission, this may be the last mission they're a functional human being for, type of thing. So you're like, I really need them, but I think I actually have to give them the time off and not take them on this particular mission, even though they would be good for it. Or you make the hard choice and you basically say, well, this is the last time before they're just gonna muster out, because they won't be able to handle it anymore. So there's stuff like that. So it's a really fun game in that respect. And we're gonna do a lot of thinking. If you've ever played stuff like Mass Effect or other games where you really wanted to see how your actions really affected all your characters around you, this is gonna be one of those games that's gonna be really good for that. You're actually gonna be able to like talk to all of them and really understand if what you've done has messed them up or helped them out, stuff like that. And we have a Kickstarter going for it. So you go to Kickstarter and you search for Destiny's Sword. You can get in on that. And there's a bunch of different prizes. One of them is that there's a short story that I wrote, and Jen's already edited it for Destiny's Sword, that we'll give out to everybody once we hit a certain number of supporters. And if we meet the stretch goals, I'll actually write a full novel for Destiny's Sword as well. So that's one of the things we have on the back burner too. The game is not dependent on the Kickstarter though. It actually has independent funding as well. So it's the Kickstarter is a way to sort of build up interest and show publishers that they're interested in the game. So that's a really big thing for us. So if you're like, we're like, I don't know if I want to like put money into yet another Kickstarter, what we're looking for is just numbers of backers more than dollar amount, because we just want to show publishers that there is a big interest in this game, and get more people that way. But it's actually like Ken, the guy running, has been to PAX. He's going to PAX West so if you want to play a demo of the game, you're going to be able to go to PAX West and play a full, maybe a bit of a mini demo there. He's been to, I forget, it was some sort of big gaming convention in Finland that just went on, and got a bunch of publishers there interested in stuff like that. So it actually has a lot of momentum, has money other than just the Kickstarter and whatnot too. So it's not just dependent on that. If you're worried that it could disappear if the Kickstarter money doesn't come through, that's not the case. So there's that.
Is this an RPG?
It's kind of
it's a tactical RPG. So it looks like a team-based tactical RPG.
So it's like top-down, you control a squad.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of like original Final Fantasy, but instead of like a side view, more like a top-down view, and you like advance, and you're like the enemies will spawn, you have to fight the enemies. So it's like the old school original Final Fantasy, where you get like a lot of new games are like that on mobile. You get your team on one side, you get the enemies on the other side, you use your special abilities and stuff like that. So that's how the combat works. And then there's guilds, and you actually have your own guild ship and stuff like that. If you get big enough, you can actually.
I'm just trying to figure out the format. Is it like a video game, or is it like a
Oh,
pen
I'm
and
sorry.
paper?
It's a video game.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, and actually, there also on top of that, there is actually an RPG, a tabletop RPG I'm working on now too, with a company that actually makes the tabletop RPG for Doom, and they actually make some stuff for Warhammer. They make the Star Trek tabletop RPG. So it's actually like a legit company, and that one actually they think that Aeon 14 is cool enough that they're funding the whole thing. I don't have to put any money in.
That's awesome.
So we're not doing a Kickstarter. They're just like this game. We could actually. They think we can make a game that would appeal to a broader science fiction group of players without having to rely just on Aeon 14 readers. So it's actually going to happen, without me having to put any money in. The neat thing, of course, is that it's going to create a bit of a Bible too. We're actually have books that are going to describe the systems and who's there and the ships. And there'll be drawings of all sorts of things. So it's going to be really cool. And then on top of that, I'm actually going to write a book to go along with it. And the whole thing will actually take place during book 1 of Orion War, Destiny Lost. And the idea is going to be that once Joe and Jessica got captured when they were looking for Tanis, Jason Andrews sent out a second team to look for Tanis. So you're going to get to play the second team that went looking for Tanis, and then have to get back to Balam's world before the Intrepid leaves. So it'll be like a fun little sort of side story there. Yeah. Which is going to be, cool. Yeah, it's really cool. And actually, we had a great time brainstorming it with the lead of it's actually the owner of the company who actually was the one who reached out to me. So we had a great time braining it and talking about it and stuff like that. And it's a great cool thing. Both these gaming companies are now hip deep in reading Aeon 14. A bunch of the developers are reading on it. So it's sucked in this new group.
Your first hit is free.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's great. Is there a timeline on the RPG, or
it's going to be a next year thing, because he's got the Dune stuff that's consuming a lot of his energy right now. So that's coming out.
Oh well,
yeah,
probably.
I mean.
But it'll be. We're thinking maybe the second quarter next year. That we're shooting for right now for release on that. Thank you so much, man.
James hasn't given his update. Oh, go ahead.
I got
the Westerns.
Yeah, the Western Space Trilogy. So I also got one of the things I want to do is I want to do more in Audible. Audiobooks are, people say they're the fastest rising form of book consumption, but which could mean last year there was 1 and this year there's 2, because that'd be the fastest rising would be 100%. But they're actually rising a lot in volume. Almost as many people listen to audiobooks now as read ebooks. At least for people who do it once a year. So there are a lot of people doing audiobooks now. And I want to do better in audio. And there's a company out there called Aeon, which is actually kind of funny because it's so close to Aeon that I love it. They're a publisher. They're actually owned by a guy named Rhett Bruno, who is an author. He's a very good author too. He writes the Titanborn series and whatnot. And for whatever wily ways he has, he worked out a deal with Audible Studios, which is the publisher end of this versus what we indies usually is called ACX, which is sort of the Audible exchange. It's the indie version, but he actually has deals with the publisher side of it. And I'll actually get a deal where Audible/Amazon, the publisher, will promote the books a whole bunch, which will be really good all around for my audio and Aeon 14 audio and whatnot. But then I'm thinking I've done so much work world building Aeon 14 that in my head I can't really think that well other than making up a new universe.
And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, because I want to talk about that.
It's hard, and I'm doing it for Destiny. Yeah. I'm doing it for Destiny Sword too. I'm doing a bunch of world building and stuff for them. So I'm I'm just going to set it in Aeon 14, and it just won't say anywhere on it that's in Aeon 14. So it's going to be a story that's going to take place somewhere. And eventually, when all the contracts are with these people, I'll just retcon it and we'll put some Aeon 14 in it, and it'll just be fully in the fold. But when people read it, it's going to be an Aeon 14 novel. It's just not going to say Aeon 14 because I don't want.
Talking about the Westerns.
Talking about the Westerns, yes.
Yeah.
So I don't want to muddy.
So you're going to use the same tech and everything, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be exactly the same. I just don't want to muddy any of the intellectual property rights around Aeon 14 and have other people own parts of Aeon 14.
Yeah.
So it's going to take place. It's going to be one of the first FTL Wars stories. It's going to take place during the FTL Wars in the ass end of nowhere. It's going to be a trio of systems that the FTL works. The FTL works a little bit between them. And there's in certain spots so they can kind of get around a little bit faster, but they also have to go sublight quite a bit to travel between these 3 systems. And then they're a long way from any other, they're deep in a pile of dark matter, so you can't FTL into these systems. So they kind of their own little special worlds, write about them and not worry too much about the broader scenario. The first book should be called The Daedalus Job. And it's going to be it's going to be kind of like Firefly-esque in many respects. It's going to be like a small starship, and they're going to be outlaws. They're going to be taking bad jobs and stuff like that. But they're not going to be like quite as altruistic as Firefly. They're like, Captain Malcolm Reynolds was like, a good guy who lost. He's kind of like Eureka in some respects. Like he was fighting for the right side, and he lost. And now he has to live in the world. These guys be like, you know what? We just don't like anybody, so we're gonna go do our own thing.
Kind of anti-hero.
Yeah, it's gonna be like a Han Solo type anti-hero kind of guy. Yeah. And it'll be a fun crew. It's gonna be very much like I mean, it's not because it's the only tune I can play, but I really like the Sabrina type crew story, the small crew. Just a bunch of scrappy people hanging out together. So I'm going to write it very much in that style because I love writing that style. But this will actually have a male main character, which will be interesting for me because aside from like a couple times when Joe got his own time to shine, for me personally, it's the only male main character I'll have ever written. So that should be interesting. I changed to a girl and I started writing male main characters. Apparently, this is what's going to happen here now. No,
gotta keep mixing it up.
Well, it's true because I mean, all the girls I know like writing male main characters. Like Lisa likes writing male main characters, and Amy has a lot of male main characters in Catacomb.
Yep.
So maybe there's what you do. I don't know. Although James writes Andy's, I don't know. Well, you're right.
I do, but well, Eva Destruction is pretty much all Lissa and Kara, so it's
that's true. Yeah. So I think I'm done rambling.
Okay, so James.
Oh yeah, did everybody else already update? I missed it. Sorry. So that's kind of the story of my life right now is just the baby. So she was not one to get to sleep last night and then woke up. We were really hoping she'd sleep until 8 so I could be here on time, but that just didn't happen. So, but the main thing I'm working on is we finished I finished my piece of Eva Destruction, and now Mal has quite a bit to write actually. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. And we're still shooting for a June 13th release. And that is the first book that's kicking off the Sentience Wars 1 within Saul. So that's, much earlier than the Intrepid period. We're writing in 3000 as opposed to 4000. But I'm really excited about this book, but it was also a really complicated book to write. There's just a lot of things happening. So I think I first started working on it back in November. I want to say it's been a while because I remember when Vesta Burning came out, which I think wasn't that September or was that? Yeah, it's been a while.
October was when it actually came out.
Yeah. So that book took a lot out of me, like trying to deal with the baby and trying to figure out when I could write and things like that have been, because I had big plans for 2019 and it just hasn't quite worked out the way that I wanted. So this month I got invited to do some work in Josh Hayes and John Evans are starting a law enforcement space opera universe, and they invited some folks to write in that, and it's kind of the same thing. Like I was really interested in doing something a little bit different, because one of the things that's funny about their Bible is that Josh Hayes wrote artificial gravity is a thing, get over it. and I was just kind of like, ooh, I don't know about this. And I even wrote a big space battle scene, and I just couldn't you just gotta, you gotta deal with, the world. So I was having
big lie.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I can deal with the one big lie on a large object, like a space station. But when I'm trying to write, shuttles fighting each other, I had to deal with, Delta V comes into play. But basically I'm imagining this book. I don't have a title for it yet. That's been kind of the character came to me really quickly, but the title has not. And so it's basically kind of Judge Dredd meets Longmire. And if you've ever watched the Longmire series, he's a deputy in Montana, or I'm sorry, a sheriff in Montana who just is out there on his own. He's got his own personal demons he's working through, but it's basically a space western, kind of the same thing that Mal is working on. Very much a western. The setting is called New Carolina Station, which is basically Las Vegas on a space station. And so I spent a lot of time actually in my day job talking with the Las Vegas PD on the kind of special things they deal with in Vegas. And so you've got, you've got your corporations, you've got your special events, you've got crime that's happening all over the place. And so it's a really kind of cool place to, just have a story. And one of the things of this world is that it's generally positive towards law enforcement. So that's going to be a little bit different. But my main character, Danny Stanton, is a brand new deputy. He's got his own kind of demons, but he's just got the academy. He's trying to navigate what this world looks like and he's generally an idealist. So we'll find out if he gets, squashed in the system or not. But it's been fun. It's been like one thing. It's been just a straight ahead plot. So my goal was to write 60,000 words in the month of May. I got to 52,000, which, considering between working and the baby, I'm pretty excited about that. And I basically had to go find a co-working space to go write, like, on my lunch breaks and stuff. And it's been coming pretty fast. So I'm excited. Also, have we talked about, since I sold a story to the Horizons Beyond anthology that Keystroke Medium put together, so that's supposed to come out here at some point. So I don't know, I'm excited about that, but I'm really excited about Eve. I think the readers are going to be really dig the story, because it opens up a lot of things.
It's got one hell of an opening too. If you guys love the way that James does like mind bending stuff, you're going to really like the opening to Eve of Destruction, because it basically starts out as screwing you over in the noggin right away, which is awesome.
There are no flashbacks. That's one thing that was a lot of feedback from Lissa's dream, was nobody liked the flashbacks. So
I like flashbacks, but
I know. When I think about all the things like Mal let me get away with, I'm pretty like, thank you. But yeah. Otherwise, I mean, things have been going good.
It is funny though. Like Starfire is going to end on screwing you over in the head, and then Eve's going to start off the same way. So yeah, you're just going to get it for a while. You're sorry about that, folks. Rika's going to be actually no. Rika never really gets it easy either. So yeah, it's going to be rough. That's why it's fun to read. Right? It's fiction.
Yep.
So we're going to talk today about, we've almost gone an hour already. We haven't even got to our topic, but I guess it's been so long.
We haven't talked in such a long time.
Yeah. Things we're doing. I feel like we are talking about.
I only have about 15 or 20 minutes left, and I want to get into the world building thing before I have to go.
We're going to talk about world building and changing gears and stuff like that. Because I guess, we're all doing. I mean, Amy's having to work in my world, which you guys have already experienced, but it can be hard to work in someone else's world. I'm learning that myself now in Destiny's Sword. Mm-hmm. It's actually kind of liberating being in your old world, because you're just like, I'm going to do this because reasons, and that's it, so it's kind of nice. Yes. So go ahead, Lisa, talk what you want to talk about.
Well, let's see, series came out on May 8th, and we were pretty much working right up to that point to get it out. And so from that point until now, I've been building this world for this new Biogenesis War series that I've created, that Mal is going to, Wooden Pen Press is going to publish. And hats off to you for creating this entire, I had no idea how involved it was. You have to create, not only do you have to name every single star, every single planet, you have to come up with propulsion, you have to come up with weapons, you have to come up with a government, you have to come up with, just naming the characters and filling out all those, oh my God. It's taken
the world.
Holy crapola. It took me weeks. I did a 4-day weekend, mid-May. And, I got to, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And then I got to like 9:00 Monday night. And I thought, okay, I am done with my world building. I can write now. And as a writer, you kind of start jonesing for putting the words down, mm-hmm. And when you're in the middle of all this research and stuff, and you're not writing it, it kind of grates on you. And I stopped and I went and I took a shower, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna get out of the shower and sit down and start writing. I was wiped out. I got no words done that day. Four days worth.
Dry. Like they're.
Oh my God! Yeah. So I just and Amy, you've done the same thing with your Cataclysm series, and how do you? Wow.
Well, I had the advantage of having thought about the series for about 17 years before I ever published book 1. So it was a very slow evolution of building everything out. And I think I will say that I think there's a big difference between writing something that's more in the hard sci-fi realm versus, my stuff, that's my personal work is more on the science fantasy side of things.
Okay.
So I didn't have to go through the research of figuring out where the different astronomical bodies are in relation to each other, and a propulsion system that could reasonably, and calculating times of transit between, and all of that stuff. I mean, it's just they travel through subspace, and that's the extent of it. And they have artificial gravity. So I mean, if you go more on that type of space opera, there are a lot of things.
Takes less time.
But I mean, I did still have to work out my FTL system. I mean, I have a beacon network, and there are rules around how the subspace travel works. But all of those things were just over many years, and they were mostly driven by, as I was writing book one, I would then get to a point and then have to think about it. So by the time I actually wrote the follow-on books, I had done all the world building, but the first one was mostly just driven by the story and then figuring out the mechanics based on what I was doing with that.
So you hit a road bump and you go, okay, I got to figure this out.
Yeah. And I mean, I was like 11 when I started working on it, so my thought process evolved significantly over the course of doing that world building. And like the very first draft of what is now Veil of Reality, which is volume 2 in the series, there were horses on the spaceship because I was a 12-year-old girl and I wanted horses on my spaceship.
There you go.
The people to go ride because that seemed like it would be fun. But
you know, Joss Whedon.
Hey, there's chickens and stuff, and
Joss Whedon put cows on a spaceship, so
right.
You can do anything.
So, yeah. These were more like mounted police kind of horses, like work horses there for like using for traveling around when they get to a destination, not they just have a stable for.
I thought you were like the spaceship so big they use.
That's what I was just thinking, like a world ship. I mean, that'd be pretty cool because
yeah.
In some ways, a horse is more economical than some other thing.
Can you
absolutely, and that would make sense. This was just completely nonsensical. I want a horse, and I'm going to name it Nebula.
And the other thing that because Marty and I was bouncing ideas off of Marty, and
Marty's your husband, just so
yeah. Sorry, the physicist, all caps, yeah, and I would say, oh, and this. And I want to do this, and he'd say, but that sounds kind of Aeon 14ish, and you can't, you've got to differentiate yourself from Aeon 14. And I said, well, there's only so many stories, and this is something that he had a hard time buying, which is there are only so many stories in the world, and there are only so many bits of science, that you can put in. There are only so many ways you can travel. There are only so many, And yeah, and that was part of my struggle, was differentiating and trying to wrap my head around what it was okay to be similar with and what it was okay to be, what's universal in science fiction.
Yeah.
And what's unique to each each IP.
And
go ahead.
I was gonna say it's a little bit harder to differentiate from Aeon 14 because one of the main premises of Aeon 14 is that everything that we imagine happens.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So you have to just kind of in all the things, sort of things. If you want if there's not a lot that's out there that you won't find in Aeon 14.
I kind of noticed that.
I think if you're attempting to write hard science fiction, that is going to lead you towards certain things, and the reader, you're going to have similarities to Kim Stanley Robinson and there are other writers out there that are trying to do
present tense.
Yeah, but for me, like when I think about world building, like one thing I'm curious, Lisa, is like having done all that work, have you found that it is easier to write going forward, like once you kind of got your energy back, or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and before you got on, I created this really super evil bad guy, and I'm just like, once you get passion around something, and I, you create your one big lie, which, I don't, for those watching and listening, that's kind of a trope in science fiction. You grab, the one big lie that you kind of hang your hat on and you run with it. So yeah, it took me a while. I did a whole lot of mathing. I did a whole lot of sciencing. I did a whole lot of, because this is hard science fiction. But once I got that kind of established, it's come. And it's also been helpful because I'm working on the Soul Dissolution, so I can flip into Aeon 14 and actually get my writing fix by, writing half a chapter there and then popping back in, when I get frustrated.
So you're working on them concurrently, so you can kind of move back and forth between projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the thing I'm not very good at. I like to be able to work on one thing at a time. And I don't know if that's just my life right now, and I have other things I have to focus on as well. But do you find that, so it is re-energizing to move between projects like that?
So far it has been. I don't
Uh-huh.
know once I start getting into, because I'm just, I'm only, I mean, we just went past 20,000 words on Soul Dissolution, and I'm like at approaching 10 in Biogenesis 1. So, you know,
I find that what happens with me is I jump around a lot too, but invariably one of the stories like hits that point where it really starts to flow, where you figured out all of the backstory and all of the things that are driving it forward, and then you're just like, okay, now it's rolling downhill, and I was going to keep up with this thing. So
then it's
usually
a deep dive.
yeah, when that happens, you go into the one story, but it's good then because it's going fast.
Yeah.
You don't worry so much. And then usually what happens to me is around the 3/4 mark on almost every story I write, it doesn't really falter. I almost have to stop and reflect for a day or so. And so when I'm working multiple projects, sometimes it actually is good to go back to another book at that point again and to get a little bit of distance. Because that's usually when I say, okay, here's all the stuff I set up. Here's where I thought it was going. Here's where it actually went. You know?
Yeah.
Now how do I put all this back together?
Well, what I'm hoping I'm going to find is that this works as kind of a mental palate cleanser, so that when you hit that wall, and because you do with every book, you hit a wall at some point, and you go, okay, I have no idea where they're going and where this is going. You can flip over to the other one and have kind of your juices flowing there.
Yeah.
My feeling is that like doing consistent work every day, like that actually is the better way to do it. Because I find like if I'm banging my head against a project, like I sit there and stare at the empty screen, and that's not productive, So like moving between things, at least you're still producing work every day, which is better for me if I can do that.
So you get the accomplishment feels, which are important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and deadlines.
Because you're working on your own store, on your own universe now too, right, James? You started working on something.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts in the back of my mind that would be kind of wooden pen press project. And I think last time we discussed it, like it might be, I think like a far edges of Aeon 14 kind of project. So I have a character, and that's part of what I really wanted to figure this out. Like, can I keep doing like the complicated Solar War novels, which if that takes me a month and a half, to get those, 60 to 90,000 words out, and then maybe have time during our editing process to get like one more 60,000 word that's just a straight ahead, like single POV adventure story, then I could potentially start doing that. And that's something that I would like to do. I just don't know if I'm pushing myself too hard to make that happen. So I don't know if it's going to happen this year exactly, but I think next year maybe it'll be easier for me to do that. Cool. But it is something I want to do. I've got a character in mind who's kind of a Tomb Raider meets Guardians of the Galaxy. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. Yeah. But I want to do that ensemble cast, and that's actually something that this new project is. It's almost like I was thinking just about all the westerns that I love, and Deadwood has been on my mind because of the new movie. And so I've got my saloon owner, I've got my saloon owner's daughter, I've got my sheriff. Like I've got some Brooklyn Nine-Nine notes in there where you've got like the sheriff that runs things, and you've got the sergeant. Like just thinking about these kind of iconic characters that can move forward in a series, and that's something I would love to do more of. That's a series, but can be more of a interconnected as opposed to being linear with the way the series goes.
So, yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So that's something I've been thinking about a bit.
Yeah, something to think about, by the way, Gigs, where your head's a derelict I-class ship where people are riding horses around inside.
Yeah. Well, think of the ecosystem.
Amy wants that one.
Yeah. Well, when we think about like world building, for me, like astronomy is very interesting to me, but I'm more interested in interpersonal, like, social politics, economics. Okay, if we're going to put horses on a ship, like I can think of all kinds of reasons why actually, like, yeah, horses might fit in the ecosystem of a world ship, and why it might be better to have horses as opposed to drones. Like, yeah, I can recycle drones, but they don't input into my biosystem. So there could be all kinds of interesting things there that for me, that's my big lie, as opposed to, I'm not as, like, I love astronomy, but it's not as important to me as these other kind of closer things in the story. I was just thinking when Lisa was talking, like I used to do radio, and we had this guy at the station that was always talking about, theater of the mind, and how he would like come up with, just like background. He could make it sound like he was doing an interview out in the field, when actually he put everything together, from the background noise to the filters and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times world building is like that. Like, what are the key details that we can input to get the story there without spending too much time, going all the way back. Because if you focus on too many things, it just gets to be, overwhelming.
Yeah, there's actually some conversations like that going on in the fan group right now, talking about, what kind of ethnicities are there? Why don't we see more language and stuff like that? One of the things I mentioned was that, there are so many, at least in the main storyline of Aeon 14, they're flying through so many systems, meeting so many people. If I stop to to take some time to smell the roses, these books would be much, much longer, and there'd be a lot of nothing happening in them. You end up with like a chapter of setting every time they met somewhere. They're going places all the time, so it would really, and it would get confusing. You'd be like, okay, which one was the one that had the funny drink with the weird name? It would just be too much stuff. It works better when it's a smaller story, like you're talking about, James, that smaller single POV story. You can dive deeper. A great example would be the Machete stories, where like we really get to get a real feel for the worlds of the Machete system and whatnot. Or even the Lissa books, where it's much more focused just in Soul. You get and Kruinia. Like I think all of us can see Kruinia in our minds. We know what the fountain looks like. We've been on the low spin docks, stuff like that, and we can all bring that together. But if we did that everywhere, it would just become a mishmash.
Well, you have so much.
It comes down to the subgenre that you're working in a lot of cases. There are many different types of sci-fi. Yeah. And there are going to be some that you're focused in the very small area, and the politics and the interpersonal relationships are the driving force of that setting, versus telling the big epic, which is really what a lot of the Aeon 14, especially the core series, it's this very big scale. So you need to match the nuances to fit the scale that you're working with.
Yeah, totally.
So Jen, one thing I was curious about was when you edit different stories, how do you keep some of those things in your mind? Because I often think about you as really having such a huge input into the tone of Aeon 14, and do you find it being difficult, like, because you do edit other authors now still, right? Yeah. So is that hard to move between?
It really is. And there are so many like tiny grammatical things that Aeon 14 does differently than anybody else. So I have to remember what is specific to Aeon 14
Canadianisms
now, and what is like what everybody else expects, and that can be hard, and sometimes I slip up, but my authors are really good about like just gently reminding me, like, please, put commas inside the quotes, like the single quotes and stuff. And so it's just like little things like that, but I do really, when I'm editing non-Aeon 14 things, it makes me appreciate Aeon 14, like what I've found here, and because it's bigger, and it's more, I don't know, it's just like really developed, and I feel like I've spent so much time there that I really know my place in it, and or everybody else's place in it, and it's easier. So it is kind of hard to change mind frames, and I have to like take a day between projects to like reset and be like, okay, so I have to remind myself of the world that I'm going into and what the rules are there and what I'm going to find there. Like I have to shift my perspective. Do that.
That's nice. And this is the same sort of thing that Lisa's discovering, is that once you figure out all these rules and you know them all, it can make a lot of things go faster. So like, I don't have to think about this. We're going to do X, Y, Z. I think the same thing is true in the editing, because in Aeon 14 we have a lot of rules. Like, okay, if it's internal thoughts, it's italicized. If it's this type of text, it's quoted with this thing, it's quoted with that thing. This is how we emphasize. Well, it's already italicized. This is how we emphasize not. We use the 4-dot method for ellipses. And there's all these like these are the things that are hyphenated words. These are the things that are single words. So much of that stuff is already just figured out. So you don't have to think about it. It's just like, okay, here's the rules. Like anything that's hollow doesn't have a hyphen. It's always hollow or whatever. And the same thing with nano. If it's never hyphenated and whatnot. So we have, and the readers probably don't notice that, although they probably at least notice the consistency out of that things always make sense. But Yeah, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we've just ironed out, and it just is the way it is now, which is kind of nice. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And the more books that I do for someone, the more comfortable I am in that world. No one is up to the level of Aeon 14 as far as like number of books I have done for them, because I think Mal, we're up to like 53 projects I've done for you at this point. If I'm going by the invoices,
It's got to be way more than that. There are 81 Aeon 14 books now.
I know, but I didn't come into it until.
Yeah, but you redid some of them. I mean, I guess you didn't do some of the Lissa books. You didn't.
I didn't do any of the Lissa books. I haven't done the Machete System books.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
I didn't do the Kylie stuff.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. You didn't do some of the Kylie stuff. You're right. I guess that does make sense. You'd be in the 50s.
But even with that, I mean, I have some authors that are maybe up to like, I'm up to like 6 or 7 with them. And I mean, again, the longer I spend in their world, the easier it is for me to remind myself what their rules are, because we're more established. And these are also the authors that have like my phone number, so we text back and forth. And
well, there are rules, but one thing I was thinking about was like the tone of the story. Like, so having input into like, hey, this would normally be a little, what the character's doing, or the I guess, by tone, just like what the overall feel of the book. And if that's hard to, I can see where I feel like Aeon 14 is pretty consistent. Like, each of us has our own sort of little, quirks we bring to it. But is that something that's hard to move between? Because for me, that feels like one of the more difficult things to pull off as an author. If I'm going to move between worlds and have something that's completely a different tone, as opposed to, between the different projects.
It's hard when I'm doing a genre that I haven't moved around in a lot. So like YA is still kind of new to me. And so there are some things where I'm like, this is kind of mature for YA. And they're like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, why are we talking about that?
Yeah.
And so I don't know the rules for like romance and fantasy and YA and stuff. And so I'm kind of trusting the authors on that. And I know that can be kind of difficult because I'm the editor and I'm maybe supposed to have some of that expertise, but I've never told anyone that I'm like traditionally trained. I did not go to college for this. This is just my brain. This is just me and my natural ability and the things that I learn over time. So I'm in that way, I'm easy like to train, to adapt to different people. Because I don't have a hard set of rules, but that also makes me like, when they come ask me questions, I'm like, this is my understanding of it. This is an article I've read on it, but I don't have the answer. And so that can hurt my credibility or add to it, but I haven't lost any clients because of that. So I don't know. Well, whatever I'm doing is working, I guess.
I know you've edited a whole lot of very like high selling books. So I think that's, I don't know. I wouldn't sell yourself short on the whole like going to college thing, because that's not the most important aspect of it.
I mean, I did go to college, just not I didn't get a degree or a certificate or whatever it is in editing specifically.
In editing, yeah.
But yeah, it is hard to like so because I don't know those rules. I didn't really finish my thought. Sorry, because I don't know those rules. It's harder for me to know if what I'm reading, the content and the characters and stuff, is consistent with what the market is expecting, because I work with a lot of people who write to market, and I don't know what that market is.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, Aeon 14 doesn't really do that. Aeon 14 writes to Aeon 14.
Yes.
So it's sort of separate from that in many respects.
Yeah.
It's sort of its own little mini market at this point.
So
but I think that ultimately that's the better thing to do.
I think whether you're not at the whim of whatever's currently trendy, at least. It's just a funny note about what's acceptable in YA. Jill's philosophy, because Jill has written some YA, is that if she's at a book signing and a 12-year-old comes up and the 12-year-old's mother is there and says, "Can my daughter read your book?" my wife wants to be able to say yes and not feel bad. So that's her policy. And since we have a 9-year-old girl, we know very much what we would like a child that age to be reading.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was involved with the raising of a adolescent girl for a while, and the stuff that she was reading was way more mature than stuff that I would have read at her age. But like, I don't know. So I guess the world has changed, or I don't know, because there's all these like YouTube and Vines and all of that, like on the internet, like they have so much access to
mature content that we would never been knew existed.
Yes, that. Yeah. So it's different.
Is it, along what you're talking about, is it difficult for you to switch between doing third person and first person and whatnot? Because Aeon 14, we're very specific. It's third person omniscient narrator. Well, it's partially omniscient. The narrator doesn't know anything the character doesn't know. But the narrative is very pulled back from the character's tone. I
do have a hard time switching between that because in first person, narrative is still in their head, so they don't have to italicize the internal thought. But for me, there's still a distinct difference as a reader between narrative and like the character telling the story like they're telling it to someone else, and the character reflecting on what's happening to themselves. Like I still think there's a distinction between that, and I don't think it should all be smooshed together in narrative. But I think
do any of your writers do like Kim Stanley Robinson does, which is third person present tense?
Oh.
Yeah, it's really hard to read.
It's like third person past tense. Like I don't know.
That's what we write is third person past tense.
Yeah. I don't read anything in the third person present. I think that would be really hard for me because it's simultaneously pulling me out of the story and pushing me into it. And I feel like there's what's the word I'm thinking of? It starts with dis. It's not
disassociation, kind of a
cognitive dissonance.
Disconnect, dissonance.
It's like a dissonance, I think might be it. It's like a twisting, like I don't know. It's weird. It's like a push and a pull, and it's
the uncanny valley of writing.
What?
Yeah, the uncanny valley of
that's
writing.
exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's just really, and it pulls you out.
You know what the uncanny valley is, Jen? It's when something looks almost human but not quite, like a mannequin or like some of the new androids that we're getting. They look close enough to human that you can recognize as human, but they still don't look quite right human, and you can't tell why. Am I getting this right, Lisa?
It gives you a kind of a creepy feeling. It gives you it really it pulls you out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's why like clown dolls are so like people just don't like them because there's
clowns and dolls are both terrible, and when you put them together, they're doubly terrible.
Well, large scale humanoid dolls. Like I hate any doll that's larger than like 2 feet. Between 2 feet and 4 feet looks.
You give it 2 feet? No.
That's too tall.
I gotta go, guys.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye, Lisa.
That is actually interesting that they do a lot of things with dolls and toys to make them look like they're not real. Like that's why cartoon characters don't have 5 fingers on their hands. They have 4 or 3 fingers and a thumb. They do all sorts of things on purpose to make them a little bit less human, so you don't enter that uncanny valley range. But that's like way off from our original topic here.
Yeah. It's okay. No, we're changing gears, trying to think.
I actually have been thinking about trying to write something first person, but I don't like to read first person. Like it's not my thing. I blame it's probably Tolkien's fault. Because I started with Lord of the Rings. I'm like, third person, I love it. I just kind of went from there. And everything was third person when we were younger. Like Narnia was third person, Anne McCaffrey was third person, Highland's third person, But the one thing that's been, and this is sort of like a right to market thing I struggle with. I don't like doing things because the market demands it, but at the same time, we're trying to be entertainers. We're writing for people to be entertained and to enjoy themselves. So if people want to consume a certain type of entertainment, you kind of have to do it. So I've been thinking about writing something first person. I'm just not sure if I could actually pull it off.
Well, I think that note, I think was what Lisa just said, like this, it's very difficult, I think, to have a large scope story in first person because you're locked inside that person's point of view, their experience, they're the spotlight of what they're seeing. And I think that for certain kinds of stories, like Dresden Files are probably the thing I've read most extensively, first person, that was kind of a genre story. But I think if you have a great character, like first, there's nothing better than first person. Yeah. But if you're trying to like tell something really large, I think it can be really limiting. And I've read authors that try to do like multiple first person POVs, and that is my
biggest pet peeve.
Yeah,
the moment that you have someone's name in the chapter heading because it's their perspective and it's all I.
Yeah. Nope. Right.
Yeah, it can be tricky. I mean, that does happen in some of the other genres, like YA and urban fantasy and stuff.
Yeah, I won't read it.
Yeah, I mean, urban fantasy is all about the first-person POV.
I've done a lot of urban fantasy. I don't mind first person. I don't, because it lets you do what Michael was talking about earlier and stopping and smelling the roses. Like you get all the details, you get all the minutia from this person's perspective. I don't mind it. I just have a hard time editing it when I'm used to
The one reason why I was thinking about doing
or knowing what the expectations and
Right.
the criteria are.
Yeah, because like with Aeon 14, we know that if the narrative is too much in the character's voice, that's a mistake. We have to fix it, and so on and so forth. But yeah, in first person, like what are the rules for that? And I guess, like you said, that's why it matters. Once you do a bunch of books with an author, you kind of know what they're looking for. But the reason why I was thinking about first person is it does do better in audiobooks. Whenever people who like to listen to audiobooks really like first person a lot. So
that makes sense, because it's like you're hearing the person's
it's a bit more like
telling a story. It's like interacting with another person. I
forgot to mention, I've actually got this is like super early days, but there is someone who's interested in doing an audiobook of doing new audiobooks for the Orion War, but they would be a dramatic presentation instead of just a straight narration.
Interesting, like
that'd be cool.
Almost.
Like what?
Sound effects and
so kind of like the Doctor Who radio show type of thing. If you've ever listened to that type of
that would be cool.
Yeah, and I checked in my license. So Tantor is the publisher of the audiobooks for that book for Orion War. I don't do those ones myself actually, but the publisher does them. And their contract specifically says it's not for dramatic presentations. So I could actually produce a second version that's a dramatic presentation, and it would fit within my existing contract. So
nice.
That could be fun. It'd be like writing a screenplay effectively, which means the story would actually have to be rewritten.
It'd be such a huge cast to need to figure out. I mean, you need to have people with multiple voices. Like you have.
Yeah, they said you have to pare down the story a little bit to make it doable. They said like usually like most like voice actors can do like 3 or 4 characters, but you can't have to do that many more. Too many more than that. So you have to kind of try and pare it down. But I think it'd be really fun. It could be a fun thing to do.
Well, we had a couple that auditioned for, I want to say, I guess it was Lys's Dream. That was going to be, they were going to do, but it was more just kind of a back and forth thing. But it was a little like, I don't know, I'd be excited to see this as a dramatic presentation, because audiobooks that just switch between 2 people don't quite work for me, I guess.
To me, it feels jarring because I feel like in a narration, it's like someone's reading you the story.
Yeah.
And that's like, so it's like The Princess Bride, and Grandpa's sitting beside the bed reading us the story type of thing. But if it's a narration, they switch back and forth, then it feels like, well, now it's like kind of a dramatic presentation, but not really, it's, although I know someone, a romance author that was doing a presentation at a conference I was just at, and she's actually doing one where she's going to have 4 actors doing going through the book. So, but I think her story is written, I don't know how she's doing 4, to be honest, but I know that works well in romance, because in romance it's usually, the guy for one chapter, the girl for the next chapter, guy, girl. So they just switch the whole chapter when they do that. So you get the chapter from the girl being read by the girl, and you get a chapter from the guy, which I think that would probably work. But when you've got, like, say, for example, Lys's Dream, it'd be one person doing everything except for like Lyssa or something like that. And that might
right. Yeah. That's exciting. I think more ways that we can like expand the material like that is, it's like, that's why the RPG is so exciting, and because it's going to bring people in from new directions and different, just really open up the story in cool ways.
That was one thing I wanted to do with Aeon 14 too, especially the Orion War time period, to just create this setting that is big enough for us just to tell tons of stories and do lots of fun things with. Because it's really, the Orion War itself is probably only going to be like 5 to 8 years, but the repercussions of it, and there was a 20-year build-up from when the Intrepid showed up to when the war really kicked off. There's probably about a 30-year period across like 10 million stars. Like, we could tell basically any story we ever wanted to in there. So it's going to be, and then they'll all connect, and they'll have a lot of fun tie-ins and stuff. So I'm stoked.
I know.
It makes me curious though, like, how would you pare down Orion War?
Oh, I know too. I'm like, I don't know.
Because if you pare it down, then it's not
like, it's my baby.
Book
well, that's where I think sometimes with that, you almost do need another person to come in and give their, like, when I've watched people do comic books, and basically you have to pare like something like each page down to maybe like 5 lines or something, just when it comes down to pulling the dialogue out and the setting out, and you got to just pare it down so closely for each panel, and then look at like what information each panel gives, and so many pages of setting, or some narrative could be just one panel, and you kind of have to depend on someone else to do that if you can't do it yourself. I don't know, it's like a screenplay. Like, I struggle with trying to write screenplays. Especially I think going from a book to the screenplay, because there's so much information, and you have to really trust the actors to provide so much to the story. And if they're doing something different than what you envisioned, you just have to step back from that and let them do it.
Yeah, that's actually something we're doing at Destiny Sword. Is we're actually producing sort of like they're going to be screenplays with like maybe 3 or 4 full-page art things to go with them. So you'll be reading this that story that you edited, Jen. We're actually going to turn that into a screenplay as well, and it'll have a whole bunch of full-page art that goes along with it. And that's actually, so I don't know how to write screenplays, right? Like I've got no freaking clue how to write a screenplay because there's a lot of rules to it. So I got Final Draft installed now. I'm working on it, but I decided to write the story out longhand first because that's how I get to know the characters and everything. And I've got to like figure out, okay, how do I get this thing down to like a 3-page to 4 to 5-page screenplay? It's really hard.
Yeah. I'm in the process of trying to convert a screenplay that I wrote well over a decade ago into a novel form. And even going that direction is this whole other thing. 'Cause there's so much that you can do with, it's just like they walk into a room, but now I have to describe that room.
Yeah.
And the flow of what you can do of like having a sort of the establishing a series of shots, and you just have the quick cuts to like cars driving down the road and then people on the sidewalk and then a building front.
Right.
Like, that doesn't really belong in the novel. You need to figure out a completely different way to establish where this person is and why they're going there. And they really are completely different mediums. And at the time that I was taking screenwriting classes in college, I had written the Veil of Reality, but I hadn't done it well yet, and so now being many novels deep, I have this completely different appreciation for the form than I did back then. So that's kind of cool to be able to take that step back and look at the different mediums and being able to understand how they are different now. But the project is not going to be this easy translation that I was initially thinking it was going to be.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about Aeon 14 is that we do have approached this as a team. And even though it's Mal's baby, I think if you can't do that mentally, it's much more difficult to make that leap to do a different medium like screenwriting, or, to be able to switch what you've been so focused in or unwilling to let someone else play with that a little bit. You're not going to be very effective, especially with, making a film is so collaborative. Because even it's always a little sad, like to see, like you have the screenplay and then what actually gets turned into the movie could be something absolutely completely different than what you started with.
I think I was thinking you mentioned about how the medium changed things so much. Even knowing that our books could be narrated, we actually write them a little bit different now.
Yeah.
Because when I wrote Outsystem, there were a lot of rapid exchanges. There's this one scene when they're at the party right near the beginning, and Tanis and Joe were having a link conversation at the same time they're having an out loud conversation. And I didn't have to tag that too heavily because on the page you could tell what was Link and what was not. And when the narrator got that, she's like, I have no idea how to narrate this in such a fashion that anyone would be able to understand it. So I actually added some tags into the print or into the ebook edition so that it would match their narration, because Amazon cares about that. Mm-hmm. So that it was actually possible for her to narrate that and have it. And then now when I write things, I add a little bit more tagging than I would normally. And tagging is like he said, she said, Tanis said, or more elaborate versions of that, just so that when it gets narrated, the listener will be able to tell a little bit better who's actually talking.
Yeah, it was the same for me. Listening to my audiobooks for the first time actually did change how I ended up writing in a lot of ways. And I always had a fairly strong internal narrator as I write. That's just kind of my own personal style. But I hear it differently now than I did before. Just thinking, okay, if this is being spoken out loud, is the punctuation here going to make sense if you can't see the punctuation?
Yeah, even that, it doesn't matter, yeah. Where you put the pauses and everything like that. You have to think about it, which is fun. It's part of it. It's part of the creative process, I think.
When I'm editing, I read it out loud too, because I'm not classically trained, I'm not confined to where commas are supposed to go. So like I'll read a sentence and be like, okay, when I'm listening to this, how does it need to be broken up for me to understand what the hell is happening? Because there are some long sentences and I have to figure out how that works.
I never write long sentences. What are you talking about?
Never. Your sentences aren't like a paragraph long. No.
Never done that.
No, not one. Definitely
never commas that should be a semicolon either.
No, I've never done those either. My thing is like I don't understand. I mean, I didn't used to understand semicolons at all, so I just never used them. I figured my editor would put them in where they're necessary. But now I actually have now I put semicolons in, and Jen doesn't take them out. So I'm learning. Sometimes, yes, there are semicolons. You're like, look, dude, or dudette. That was weird. These are two entirely separate sentences, and you just can't use a semicolon to glue them together, no matter how much you want.
Well, I was just actually what I was thinking about was I was just listening to an interview with Kristen Catherine Rush, who, if you're not familiar with her, she's been editor of the Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine, and pretty awesome lady. But she was talking about how editing is all about taste, and you could have 5 editors with the same story, and like 2 will hate it, 2 will love it, and 1 whatever. So I think it all comes down to what. That's why I think it's so important what Jen does to help establish what the tone and kind of direction, not necessarily direction, but just how the stories are consistent in that way. And I would argue that like certain people get really hung up on commas and things like that, and the readers don't care. The readers want a great character and a great story, and in some ways they do want to be led through it and how to read it, like to know where pauses are and things like that. But
some readers care.
So half of them are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's like in the English language, you really only need commas for clauses and lists. I mean,
right.
By and large, you don't need them for everything else. Now we could probably debate that to the end of time, that particular statement I've just made. But as long as like subordinate clauses and lists have commas in them, it'll be readable. You're not going to get hung up on what parts of the thought are connected to one another. But then after that, you can debate all the other commas.
Well, I guess, yeah, I wouldn't ever put a comma someplace that was not a subordinate clause, but I do think it's, I don't know. I guess I just don't that. So
there are certain scenarios where you're like, okay, I'm doing an and, but because there's rules about how, and I'll highlight some of these rules. We're like, okay, if there's no new subject in this clause, then you don't use a comma. And if there is a subject in the clause, then you do use a comma. Like there's a lot of like nuance like that. And that's the stuff that readers are never going to, John Q. Reader at least, even if he does know, he's not going to care when he's reading, not to say that John Q. Reader doesn't know about these rules, but I find that when I'm reading, I just go right in. I'm not even seeing the words anymore.
That stuff really bothers me. So I get really hung up on it. So I'm very particular when it comes to my own work. And I do want things to be grammatically correct in the classic sense. I think I have enough readers who care about that stuff too, that I really try to adhere to it.
I hired Jen. It's like, Jen, she's on this way on my screen.
So I guess when I think back to like authors that I love that are kind of modernist, I guess, like Faulkner or Hemingway or Virginia Woolf, like it's like doing interesting things in the text is interesting to me. So I want to, as long as I trust the author, I'm willing to go along with them, and I don't like they didn't let rules get in the way of creating a voice and telling a story. And so I think the problem is you have to develop that trust with your readers so that they get what you're doing, and it's not just I don't know what I'm doing. It's like spacing things out with em dashes or tying 2 ideas together with a semicolon, or that kind of stuff is interesting to me. I just want to trust that the writer knows what they're doing when they do it.
Yeah,
I've read a lot of poetry, and so that's made me really flexible in terms of how a story gets told, especially with Maya Angelou. And there are several other poets like Anne Sexton who really play with how lines are made on a page.
Yep.
Like there is a specific kind of poetry, I don't remember the name of it, but where you arrange the lines on the page in such a way that it makes a picture that correlates to what the poem is. And so I feel like that's less confining and more confining in some ways. But it's really interesting, and those things don't get punctuated the same way or sometimes at all. And you're letting so many other things tell the story. And it's just really beautiful and really like rich.
Maybe at some point there'll be an Aeon 14 poetry book.
Science fiction poetry is, if you want to get into some magazines, that is a good way to do it because they love poetry and nobody writes it necessarily. So I have some friends that's how they got into, analog and fantasy and science fiction and whatnot.
It's kind of fun, actually. You should do that. I used to write poetry. I actually used to publish Poetry Easy back in the late 90s, believe it or not. And I actually had a monthly edition, and I had usually between 15 and 40 poems in
Wow.
the magazine.
That's a lot of poems.
Actually, I had a whole lot of people that submitted to it, and we did some short stories too and stuff like that. But it was mostly poetry.
Mm-hmm.
It would be cool, Mel, if you had some poems, like from the POV of some characters, like Katrina.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Katrina probably would write some good poems.
I think she would. Yeah.
We need some AI poetry.
Maybe even Roxy.
Sorry, what's Cheeky's poems?
Roxy would have.
Yeah.
She has a lot of like angst and inner stuff that she's been working through. I bet she would write some really good poetry.
I think.
I imagine her having like a Fiona Apple kind of tone to her lyrics.
Yeah, Roxy, for those of you guys don't know, who you probably don't know, Roxy ended up in a rather unfortunate incest relationship with her brother, and didn't know it because he had wiped her mind. So she's got a lot of issues.
She's a Targaryen.
Yeah. So, but I was going to say that Cheeky has some pretty interesting poetry.
Erotica.
Or maybe not. Maybe Cheeky's poetry would be all really deep about just flying.
Maybe that's true. Then maybe that's me pigeonholing her. Sorry, Cheeky.
And then she would draw this beautiful portrait, and then she would just tie it into sex somehow at the end. Just like that time when I was with that guy on Andromeda.
Beautiful beach, and then we had sex on it.
She's a beat poet.
Yeah.
No, I feel like a big part of my growth as a writer for the last like probably 4 years or so has been I was always much more focused on the words as opposed to the story and the character, and so that has been something that I've moved away from because I feel like that oftentimes if you do something that's really interesting to you, it throws people out of the story. So I've kind of stopped doing as much of that I used to. But
I think that's the sort of thing that standalone novels are good for. But when you want to write a big, expansive series, you can't hang it on sort of specific, interesting things in the text like that, because you want to make it consistent, and you can't just if you do stuff like that forever, it just gets weird.
Now, I have a friend who was in my writing group here in town that got I think Simon & Schuster published it. It was a collection of short stories about a box that would tell you what you need to be happy. And it's a really great, it was a great idea. We love, I love the book, but it just got savage. Like they sold it as a science fiction, standalone, and it just got savaged. And that was like, I felt really bad for, like, on a craft level, it's an awesome book. And then it wasn't meeting what the genre wanted.
That sounds like a book I would read.
In the way that they sold it. Yeah. So I don't know. That was a lesson.
Oh, that sucks. That's a really crappy lesson.
Yeah, that's the downside of being traditionally published, is that if they pigeonhole your book wrong, and they won't take any more books from you, because like, well, this person doesn't make any money, so that's that.
I know. Well, she got a job writing or teaching fiction, so I guess that all depends on what your goals are.
That's true. Cool.
But well, I don't know. Is there anything else about world building that we wanted to touch on that we did not?
Well, I think we were gonna. At least we kind of want to touch on world building a little bit. I think that if we really want to get into world building, that's a whole other podcast.
Oh, that's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
And it should be one that she's present for the whole time, because
this is true.
Yeah, I could talk about world building all day, because
we're coming up on 2 hours though, guys.
Oh wow, because I jumped in late.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys haven't talked to me enough. I feel very left out.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Jen's just like, I got to glue the horns on. Jen's going to a play where she has to be a demon, so she's got to.
Oh, nice.
Got to glue the horns on.
Yeah, and all red. And I've been cleaning out my ears. I've been cleaning red makeup out of my ears for days, and I've showered multiple times since the last time I wore the red makeup. But
when I was with the silver face paint from when we were at Jordan Con, like for 2 days, I was still like, people were like, you got a little bit of silver in your ear. I'm like, still, I got it all out.
Yeah,
that's I think that because that was one of the things I wanted to talk about was cons and because like how many cons have you attended in the last between Jordan Con and Inkers Con, and like I don't know, this felt like the year of cons.
I think I've done like 4 or 5 cons, and Space Coast is coming up at the end of June, and I'll be going to NINC, which is just a writer's con, and then I'm going to have a booth at Boston Comic Con, and then we'll be going to Vegas. So I think this year is something like 9, maybe 10 cons I'll be going to.
That's crazy. Yeah, we got to talk about that.
Yeah, and I got invited as an attending professional to Dragon Con, but I already bought my tickets and my hotel and everything and actually I missed the email. And then they wrote me in and said, are you coming or what? And I'm like, crap, because I'd already bought my tickets to another con at that point. So I was kind of bummed about that, because apparently Dragon Con is like the con.
Can we still nominate for Dragon? Is this still open? I think it is.
I have no idea. Maybe it might be.
Listeners, we got to nominate something from Aeon 14 for the Dragon Award. So I will post something about that. We'll take a look.
I think novels need to be at least 70,000 words.
At least 70,000? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Which I know a lot of the books are, but just that'll narrow it down.
A couple of recent ones aren't, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we could. Yeah, we should look when the nominations run because Eva Destruction might be eligible.
Not to nominate my own stuff, but
we'll have to look at the criteria and stuff.
Yeah, but that one's a reader's award, so we can get just get folks to vote. So
that could be cool. And then I can't go. Oops.
If you can't go doesn't mean someone else can't go.
Well, I don't think James could make it to Dragon Con either because it's like September 1st type of stuff.
When is it? September 1st.
Where is it?
I thought it was. I think it's August.
Oh, is it?
It's in Atlanta.
Oh.
And the hotels were the hotels for the convention sell out within seconds of going up.
I'll get an Airbnb. Someone get me airfare and I'll go.
There you go.
Nice. Yeah, I would like to do more next year. This year is just bad. So I am going to be at 20 Books in Vegas. Already got that planned out, but
I'll be there too.
I think I want to try and go. Even though it wasn't very conducive to a working environment, I still got to spend time with a lot of my clients and make new clients. And
yeah, you got a couple new clients out of it last year. So
I did, yeah. And I got affirmation from my current ones that you need to raise your rates. We'll pay it. That really gave me a business boost and confidence boost and all that.
Cool.
And it's just nice to see everybody.
A lot of fun.
I hate Vegas, but I love all of you. So
the same way. All right. Well,
all right.
Cool. Well, thanks. I'm glad we made this happen, even if we have to jump in and out. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can't go too long without a podcast.
Exactly.
All right. Well.
All right.
Till
See you on the
next
Intrepid.
time.
Yep.
We'll
We will
see you on the Intrepid.
We'll see